The sun was rising over Ouagadougou, painting the city in hues of amber and gold, when President Ibrahim Traoré made a sudden decision. This morning, instead of his tightly scheduled meetings with ministers and diplomats, he felt a powerful urge to connect directly with the people he served. A president cannot lead from behind palace walls, he told his chief of staff, who looked concerned at this spontaneous change. I need to see the real Burkina Faso, not the one presented in polished reports. Without the usual convoy of vehicles, security detail or media presence, Ibrahim Traoré set out for the Yalgado Ouedraogo University Hospital, the largest medical facility in the country. He arrived in a simple, unmarked car with just 2 security personnel, dressed in a traditional Burkinabe shirt that made him look more like an ordinary citizen than the nation's leader. The hospital director, hastily informed of the visit, rushed to greet him at the entrance. "Mr. President, we are deeply honored. Had we known earlier, we would have prepared a proper welcome." "That's precisely why I came unannounced," Traoré replied with gentle authority. "Show me the hospital as it truly is every day. That's what matters." The hallways were crowded with patients, some sitting on benches, others on the floor. The air was thick with a mixture of antiseptic medicine and human suffering. Ibrahim moved through the corridors slowly, stopping often to speak with citizens. He knelt beside a mother cradling a feverish child, clasped the weathered hand of an elderly man whose eyes filled with tears of recognition, and listened intently to a young woman describing her struggle to afford medication. "We are working for you," he assured each person he met. "Every decision I make is with your well-being in mind." But the president couldn't ignore what he saw: outdated equipment, insufficient medicine supplies, exhausted medical staff, peeling paint and water leaking from ceilings. The hospital, like much of the nation's infrastructure, bore the scars of colonial exploitation and decades of resource extraction that had left the country struggling despite its natural wealth. Dr. Ouattara, the head of pediatrics, joined the presidential party. His face showed the fatigue of someone who had battled impossible odds for years, yet his eyes still held determination. "Mr. President, would you like to see our intensive care unit? That's where we face our greatest challenges and where we most urgently need support." Ibrahim nodded and followed the doctor through a maze of corridors. As they turned a corner, the president's foot suddenly slipped on a wet patch of floor. He quickly regained his balance, but the moment drew his attention to an older woman in a faded blue uniform who was mopping nearby. "Please be careful, sir," she said softly, her head bowed respectfully. The floor was just cleaned. "No harm done," Ibrahim replied kindly. "I wasn't watching my step." He was about to continue when something about the woman, perhaps her voice or her posture, triggered a strange sensation. A shiver ran down his spine as he paused, studying her face beneath her traditional headscarf. "Miss Adiete, President, shall we continue?" Dr. Ouattara asked, eager to show his department's needs. But Ibrahim stood motionless, captivated by a feeling he couldn't explain, a sense of familiarity that transcended his current role and reached back to his childhood. "What is your name?" he asked suddenly. The cleaning lady looked surprised by the question. She slowly raised her head, revealing a face etched with years of hard work, but still possessing a gentle dignity. "My name is Aminata, sir," she answered softly. That name echoed in Ibrahim's mind like a half-forgotten melody. Aminata, a common name in Burkina Faso, yet it felt deeply significant to him in this moment. "Thank you, Aminata," he managed to say, then continued his hospital tour. But as he listened to doctors describe their challenges and patients share their stories, his thoughts kept returning to the woman with the mop. Her face had awakened something in his memory, fragments of a past that seemed both distant and intimately close. Later, as Dr. Ouattara showed him the maternity ward, Ibrahim spotted Aminata again, walking down a nearby corridor with her cleaning supplies. Acting on an impulse he couldn't explain, he excused himself from the group act. "Tutor, please continue the tour with my chief of staff. I'll rejoin you shortly." Without waiting for a response, he walked briskly down the hallway and caught up with Aminata, who startled slightly when she saw him. "I apologize for interrupting your work," he said gently. But I'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind." Aminata clutched her mop tightly, her eyes downcast. "I haven't done anything wrong, Mr. President." "Of course not," he assured her with a warm smile. "Tell me, how long have you worked at this hospital?" 23 years, sir," she answered, still not meeting his gaze. "I started here after leaving my village." "And which village are you from?" "Kwayogo, in the San Matanga province in the north." Ibrahim felt a jolt of recognition. Kwayogo, the village where he had spent part of his childhood after his father's death. Memories cascaded through his mind. The smell of millet cooking over open fires, women singing at the communal well, elders telling stories beneath the baobab tree. "Did you know a woman named Fatima in that village?" he asked, his heart beating faster. At the mention of that name, Aminata finally looked up, her eyes meeting his. Her expression revealed profound emotion, a mixture of surprise and recognition that mirrored his own feelings. "Yes," she whispered. "I knew her well." "So, she was your biological mother?" Ibrahim's throat tightened. "So you knew my mother and me?" Aminata nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. "I knew you when you were just a little boy, Ibrahim. You were only 5 when your father died." A heavy silence fell between them in that hospital corridor. The busy sounds around them, nurses calling out, announcements over speakers, visitors talking, seemed to fade away as if they stood in a bubble of shared memory. "Aminata," Ibrahim finally said, his voice barely audible, "were you close to my family?" The woman wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "I was more than just a neighbor, Ibrahim. But perhaps this isn't the right place for such conversations." Ibrahim understood immediately. This crowded hospital hallway, where anyone might interrupt or overhear, was not suitable for the deeply personal revelation he sensed was coming. "Where do you live now, Aminata?" "In the Depoya neighborhood, sir. A small house I share with my niece. I would like to visit you tomorrow, if that would be acceptable," Ibrahim said. "We could speak more comfortably there." Aminata looked astonished. "You would come to my house? But it's just a simple home, not fitting for a president." "It's not the president who wishes to visit," Ibrahim replied softly. "It's the child from Kwayogo who wants to recover his past." With those words he rejoined the official tour group, but his mind remained distant for the rest of the visit. As he listened to reports about medicine shortages and equipment needs, one question dominated his thoughts. What role had this woman played in his life, and why did her face feel so hauntingly familiar? Back at the presidential palace that evening, Ibrahim cancelled all his meetings. He retreated to his private office and opened an old photo album, one of the few personal possessions he had kept through years of military service and his rapid rise to leadership. The faded photographs showed a kind-faced woman, his mother Fatima, holding the hand of a small boy. Other images captured village life, round mud huts with thatched roofs, the communal gathering place under massive trees, children playing in dusty yards. But nowhere could he find Aminata's face among these precious memories. He called his personal assistant. "I need all available information about a woman named Aminata from Kwayogo village who works as a cleaner at Yalgado Hospital. Keep this request confidential." That night, sleep eluded Ibrahim. Childhood memories surfaced like bubbles in water. A woman singing lullabies, cleaning scraped knees, telling stories by the flickering light of a kerosene lamp. Was it his mother in these memories? Was it Aminata? The faces blurred together in the mist of time. Before dawn, Ibrahim made his decision. He would visit Aminata not as a head of state, but as a man seeking his own history. His assistant had compiled a basic file. Aminata, 63 years old, widowed, employed at the hospital since 1998, residing in Dapoya, nothing remarkable except her long-term commitment to a humble occupation. Ibrahim dressed simply in dark pants and a plain shirt. He instructed his staff that he would travel with only a driver and one security officer, no motorcade, no fanfare. "Mr. President," his chief of staff protested, "you have a scheduled video conference with the Ghanaian president at 11. Reschedule it," Ibrahim replied calmly. "Tell him I have an urgent personal matter." The unmarked presidential vehicle wound through Ouagadougou's morning traffic. Through tinted windows, Ibrahim observed the city awakening. Street vendors setting up, school children in uniforms walking together, workers rushing to jobs. This was the real Burkina Faso, not the abstract concept of a nation, but the living, breathing reality of its people. They arrived at a modest yellow concrete house with laundry drying in a small front yard. "Wait here," Ibrahim instructed his security guard. "I'll go alone." He pushed open the creaking metal gate and entered the yard. A young woman washing dishes at an outdoor tap froze when she recognized him. "Good morning," Ibrahim said simply. "I'm looking for Madame Aminata." Too startled to speak, the young woman pointed toward a door standing slightly ajar. Ibrahim thanked her with a nod and approached the entrance, knocking gently. "Come in," called a familiar voice. Inside, the home was humble but impeccably clean. Basic furniture, framed photographs, colorful fabrics draped over chairs. Prepared. The space radiated dignity despite its simplicity. Aminata sat by the window, dressed in a traditional outfit with blue and ochre patterns. She did not seem surprised to see him. "I was expecting you," she said with calm certainty, gesturing to a small pot on a side table. "I made tea." Ibrahim sat across from her. Through the open window came the sounds of neighborhood life. Children laughing, motorbikes passing, a vendor singing out his wares. The moment felt both surreal and profoundly right. "Since yesterday," Ibrahim began, "I haven't been able to stop thinking about our meeting. There's something about your face that feels like a memory I can't fully grasp." Aminata poured tea with careful, graceful movements. "Children often forget," she said softly. "It's natural, but sometimes the heart remembers what the mind cannot recall." She rose and went to a small wooden dresser, from which she removed an old box. Opening it, she withdrew a small object, a bracelet made of colorful beads and cowrie shells. "You wore this on your wrist," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a gift from your mother, Fatima. She had it blessed by the village marabout to protect you." Ibrahim took the bracelet as if it were a sacred relic. Suddenly, memories flooded his mind. Himself as a child, playing with these beads, counting them to help himself fall asleep. "How do you have this?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Aminata took a deep breath. "When your mother Fatima became very ill, I was her closest neighbor and friend. I had lost my husband the year before, and we supported each other through difficult times. When she felt death approaching, she asked me to care for you." Tears streamed down Aminata's weathered cheeks, but she continued speaking. "For almost 2 years I raised you as my own son. I cooked your meals, washed your clothes, told you stories at night so you wouldn't be afraid of the dark. You called me Mama Nina because you couldn't pronounce my full name." Ibrahim, felt his heart stop. Mama Nina. Those two simple words unlocked a door in his memory. Suddenly, he remembered a woman with a warm laugh who carried him on her shoulders, who taught him the names of birds, who nursed him through fevers with bitter herbal medicines. "I remember," he whispered, overwhelmed by emotion. "I remember you, Mama Nina." Aminata smiled through her tears. "When your mother died, your father's brother came to claim you. He believed, according to tradition, that a boy should be raised by his father's family. I begged him to let you stay with me, but I was just a widow with no authority. They took you to the city, and I was forbidden from contacting you." Ibrahim rose, unable to contain his feelings. He knelt before Aminata and took her hands in his. "You were my second mother. How could I have forgotten you? You were so young," she answered gently. "And perhaps the adults told you to forget, to stop speaking of me. That happens often when children are moved between families. But how have you lived all these years?" Ibrahim asked. Aminata shrugged slightly. "After you were taken, I couldn't bear to stay in the village. Everything reminded me of you and your mother. I came to Ouagadougou and found work at the hospital. I lived simply, keeping your memory in my heart. And when you became a public figure, a respected military officer and then president, I watched your journey from afar, always in silence. I was so proud of you, Ibrahim. You should have come to me," he said, his voice breaking. "And what would I have said? Hello, Mr. President. I'm the woman who cared for you for 2 years when you were a child. Who would have believed me? Who would have allowed me near you?" Ibrahim understood the truth in her words. The protocols of power, the security concerns, the barriers between a leader and ordinary citizens, all would have made such a reunion impossible. "But fate made me slip on your freshly cleaned floor," he said with a smile through his tears. "Life moves in mysterious ways," Aminata replied simply. Time passed quickly in Aminata's small home. Ibrahim forgot his responsibilities, his meetings, his position. In that simple room, he was just a man recovering a lost piece of his life. Aminata showed him old photographs, some from the village, some of his mother Fatima, and a few precious images of little Ibrahim sitting on her lap. These pictures had been her treasure for decades. "Every year on your birthday," she told him, "I prepared your favorite childhood dish, rice with peanut sauce and chicken. I shared it with neighborhood children and prayed for your health and happiness." Ibrahim was deeply moved by her quiet, steadfast love. "All these years, you cared for me from a distance. A bond of the heart never truly breaks." Aminata said simply. Her niece, who had discreetly left when the president arrived, returned with food, thick millet porridge and a stew made with baobab leaves. This simple meal transported Ibrahim back to his childhood. "Aunt Aminata often spoke of you," the young woman said shyly as they ate. "But I thought it was just a story. I never imagined the president would come to our home." Aminata looked at her niece with affection. "Fatou is like a daughter to me. Her mother, my younger sister, died 10 years ago. We take care of each other." Ibrahim turned 10. "Fatou, your aunt was my second mother. Even when I forgot her, she gave me love when I needed it most." They shared a meal that felt sacred in its simplicity. Ibrahim listened, enthralled, as Aminata recounted stories from his childhood, how he had fallen into a shallow well and been rescued, how he had imitated roosters at dawn, how he had always slept clutching a small blue blanket. Each story restored another piece of his lost past. "Do you remember the tales I used to tell you?" Aminata asked. "The one about the hare who outwitted the hyena," Ibrahim replied instantly, surprised by his own recollection. I always asked for that one. Aminata's face brightened. You remember? You wanted to hear it every night, even when you knew it by heart. Ibrahim smiled, overjoyed to reconnect with his childhood. Then his expression grew serious. This moment of genuine human connection, far from the protocols and pressures of leadership, had touched him deeply. After all his military achievements and political power, he recognized in Aminata's home a different kind of strength and dignity. I want to do something for you, he said with conviction. You shouldn't have to work so hard at your age. Aminata looked at him calmly. You came to me. You remembered me. That is already the greatest gift I could have hoped for. But Ibrahim shook his head. No, that's not enough. I owe you a debt. A son's debt to a mother. I don't want to change his life in ways that would make you uncomfortable, but please allow me to help make your remaining years easier. I want to provide you with a proper retirement, good health care, and I want to hear more stories about my childhood, about my mother Fatima. I have so much to remember. Aminata regarded him with wise, gentle eyes. If this is what you wish, I accept. But I don't want anything extravagant, Ibrahim. Just enough to live peacefully with Fatu, and perhaps to visit the village sometimes to reconnect with my roots. Ibrahim agreed, moved by her humble spirit. He rose and embraced her warmly. The scent of her clothing, shea butter and subtle incense, triggered a cascade of memories. It was the smell of safety and love. When he finally departed, the sun was setting. His driver and bodyguard looked concerned after the long absence. Is everything all right, Mr. President? The security officer asked. Ibrahim glanced back at the small yellow house where Aminata and Fatu stood in the doorway, waving goodbye. Better than all right, he replied. Today I found a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. In the weeks that followed, Ibrahim arranged for Aminata's early retirement from the hospital with a generous pension. He provided a comfortable home for her and Fatu in a pleasant neighborhood, not ostentatious but a dignified place where she could enjoy her later years in peace. That there was something more he wanted to do, something that would honor not just Aminata, but all the women like her across Africa who nurture children in need without recognition. 1 month after their reunion, Ibrahim invited Aminata to the presidential palace. She arrived wearing her finest traditional dress in the colors of Burkina Faso, nervous but dignified. To her surprise, the reception hall was filled with ministers, journalists, and television cameras. More astonishing still were the familiar faces, people from her old village, her co-workers from the hospital, even the elderly marabout who had blessed Ibrahim's bracelet all those years ago. When everyone was seated, Ibrahim took his place at the podium with Aminata in a chair of honor beside him. National television broadcast the event live across the country. People of Burkina Faso, the president began, his voice resonant with emotion. I have invited you today to acknowledge both a personal and a national debt. He turned toward Aminata, whose eyes glistened with tears. This woman beside me, Aminata Ouedraogo, was my second mother. When my birth mother Fatima fell ill, Aminata took me into her home. She fed me, cared for me, and loved me as her own child. Then life separated us, but fate has brought us together again. A murmur rippled through the audience, touched by this unexpected story. For nearly 25 years, Ibrahim continued, Aminata worked as a cleaner at Yalgado Hospital. She lived simply, with dignity and quiet strength. She never sought recognition or reward, not even when I became president. It is this humility, this greatness of heart, that I wish to honor today, not only in her but in all the unsung women across our continent who raise, support and shape the future through their silent work. Ibrahim unveiled a plaque bearing Aminata's name and a tribute to her maternal care. He presented her with the keys to her new home and documents confirming her lifetime pension. But he was not finished. In honor of Aminata and all mothers, biological and adoptive, I am establishing the Roots of Africa Foundation. This organization will provide support to women who care for orphaned children or those in difficult circumstances. It will offer financial assistance, public recognition, and a network of solidarity for these essential pillars of our African society. The audience applauded warmly. Aminata's face was serene despite her tears. When Ibrahim asked her to speak, she hesitated at first, then slowly rose to her feet, adjusting her headscarf with dignity. "I am not educated in the way of speeches," she began softly, "but I wish to say that love knows no boundaries. When I cared for little Ibrahim, I never imagined he would one day lead our nation. I simply loved a child who needed love." She paused, gathering her thoughts, then continued with growing confidence. "In our villages, we say it takes an entire community to raise a child. Every woman who helps raise a child not born to her is part of this sacred tradition. I did nothing extraordinary. I merely followed the path our ancestors showed us." Then she looked at Ibrahim with a radiant smile. "I never stopped believing that God would let me see my son again. Today, my heart overflows with joy. May God bless our president, our country, and all of Africa." This moment, broadcast throughout Burkina Faso and soon shared across social media platforms throughout Africa, touched millions of hearts. What began as a chance encounter in a hospital corridor became a powerful symbol of African values, family bonds that transcend blood relationships, community responsibility, and profound respect between generations. In the days that followed, the Roots of Africa Foundation received numerous donations and offers of support. Women from across the continent began sharing their stories of raising children who were not biologically theirs. A network of care and solidarity took shape, crossing national borders and tribal divisions. 2 months after the ceremony, Ibrahim organized a special journey to Kwayogo village, his first return since childhood. With Aminata beside him, he visited the small house where he had lived with his mother Fatima, and the neighboring dwelling where Aminata had taken him in after his mother's illness. The villagers were initially awed by the presidential visit, but they relaxed when they saw Ibrahim sit beneath the ancient baobab tree, listening eagerly to stories about his childhood. Some elders still remembered the small boy who had run barefoot through the dusty paths. One elderly woman approached Ibrahim and handed him a small object wrapped in cloth. It was a wooden spinning top, crudely carved but preserved with care. "You made this yourself," she told him. "You were so proud of it that you showed it to everyone in the village. I kept it all these years, hoping you might return someday." Ibrahim held the top in his palm, deeply moved by this tangible connection to his past. He set it spinning, watching it whirl with the same fascination he must have felt as a child. Aminata, sitting beside him, observed with quiet contentment. For the first time in decades, she felt complete. The circle of her life had closed. "Life is like a long cloth that we weave day by day," she told a journalist who had accompanied the presidential visit. "Sometimes the threads break and the pattern is interrupted. But if we continue with faith, eventually the full beauty of the design will become clear." That evening, as the setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, Ibrahim and Aminata sat together on a simple bench outside the house where they had once lived. Below them, village children played, their laughter rising like music into the twilight. "Does it bother you that people now call me your son?" Ibrahim asked softly. Aminata smiled, her eyes reflecting the peace of fulfillment. "You have always been my son, Ibrahim. In my heart, nothing ever changed." They remained side by side as darkness fell, connected by a bond that had survived time, separation, and the vast differences in their life paths. A president and a former cleaning lady, reunited by destiny in a story that now inspired a nation, and beyond that, a continent. In the gentle evening breeze, it seemed as if the ancestors themselves approved, celebrating this triumph of love over social divisions, of memory over forgetfulness, and of gratitude over indifference. In the years that followed, the story of Ibrahim and Aminata became a modern legend in Africa, taught in schools as a testament to the power of human connection that transcends class and status. It exemplified Ibrahim Traoré's leadership philosophy that true strength comes not from wielding power, but from remembering one's roots and honoring those who nurture the foundations of society. As Ibrahim's influence grew throughout the continent, his personal story became a powerful symbol of his authentic leadership, a leader who recognized that Africa's greatness lies not in mimicking Western models of development, but in embracing its own traditions of community, respect for elders, and collective responsibility. A leader who forgets those who raised him cannot truly serve his people, Ibrahim would often say in Pan-African forums, and a continent that forgets its traditions cannot chart its own future. This philosophy, born from his reunion with Aminata, became the cornerstone of a new vision for African leadership, one that honored the continent's past while building confidently toward its future, speaking with one voice to the world while remembering the countless unsung voices that had shaped its present.